I'm Kendall Ratliff. I believe that you can change your life by trying one thing at a time. You can learn more at my website, tryonething.co, or by tuning in to the Help NSFW podcast.
And I'm Johnny Fairplay, reality TV, survivor. And throughout my adventures, I've met a lot of interesting and motivating characters.
Johnny and I made this podcast because we want you to unlock your full fucking potential. So whether you want to get a little more badass or a lot more badass, strap in. Join us here each week. It's Help NSFW.
Welcome to Help NSFW. I am Johnny Fairplay. I am always joined by Kendall Ratliff, but we have a special guest in studio. This is a first time ever. Local pastor here in Danville, Virginia, Ryan Busby. Welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. I'm so happy to be here.
Today, we did not let Satan or the hackers win. There's something weird going on with Instagram and Facebook and the rest of the internet. And we said, no, not today, Satan. We have a pastor here.
Yes.
Apparently, it's all the difference. We brought our holy water.
So, what was it? Your prayers that made this happen, or was it just life? What do prayers do? That's my question. Can I?
Softball question out the gate.
Yes.
No, sophomore question.
Either.
Either way. I mean, prayer, you can say there's two things. One, it gives you a chance to align yourself with God. So prayer is a chance for you as you're processing your life, to give it to God, give it to the divine, and say, this is my life, and here it is. And then also it gives you a chance too, as you're processing in the midst of that sacred space, to kind of reorient what you're experiencing and to receive it back to yourself, so you kind of know where to head and go. You know, in a very basic way, it's a way of saying, as you sit in the silence and you believe that God is there, you are receiving both the assurance that God is here and with you, and then also the fact that, oh yeah, I can process my stuff and I can come out of this and move forward with whatever's going on. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
In my past life as a college minister, I was leading a session on prayer at a Baptist youth retreat, and I said that you can say fuck when you're praying. And I was told that that's not okay to talk about in front of the young people. So
I bet.
I still don't know if that means that God doesn't like the word fuck. If God's okay with the word fuck, you just can't say it in a prayer, or we're just not supposed to be really honest with teens about being a full human in your relationship with God. Any thoughts?
Well, I think God can handle it.
That's what I said.
If the thing that holds all things together can't handle you dropping an F-bomb, then we're in some trouble. If God's personality is that small, to not be able to handle language. Mm-hmm. Plus, you've got language in scriptures too that talk through the full range of emotions and anger and stuff. Truth be told, there's plenty of times I've literally gotten was just frustrated at serious points in my life. I've told God I hate you and I hate this. To be candid, I think that cursing at God is fine, because God is not so small that God can't process where you are. Because if you're cussing at God, you're being honest with God. And that's what God wants. If God truly knows how you're feeling, then you telling God, I hate this. This is awful. This is the worst. That's okay. And if it's laden with a bunch of expletives, that's going to be okay too.
I completely agree. Thank you for telling me that I am right.
But cuss words are social constructs, right? They're language that we have developed and given meaning to. And so the cuss words and stuff that we have developed in our own culture, are culturally dependent. And so to pretend God understands. I don't mean to ramble here, but
no.
I think God would rather you talk to God however you need to than for you to pretend you have to talk a certain way. I know I do as a person, as a pastor, I would much rather have somebody cuss in front of me than be super awkward and not be able to have a real conversation.
It is hard enough to get through life. We were just before Johnny fixed the internet. We were talking, and I was realizing.
Prayer.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you found the pump and
I did both.
Okay, but we appreciate your work.
Well, I'm just trying to give credit.
I'm so out of practice code switching. do I answer a question like an appropriate professional person or how I really feel? And that shit's exhausting. And if my thing is, if you have to do that in your relationship with God, well, good luck. This is why people don't come to church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, Ryan and I, we were playing pinball a couple weeks ago, and pinball can be frustrating. So, much like life. And, and I asked Ryan, I'm just like, do you ever slip and say, God damn? And Ryan has philosophy. It's just like, well, taking the Lord's name in vain, like, that's not what I think. That's not what Ryan personally believes it means when you say that. Like, what was,
Well, like GD is like a cultural phrase that we developed, right? Like,
Yeah.
So like in the Old Testament, like when they're talking about taking the Lord's name in vain, it's taking and using God as a promise or manipulating God in a way so as to that God is on your side in certain events. And so it's using God vainly for your own purposes, right? So like whenever, so like to be candid, like so like when like politicians invoke God for their platforms, like that's taking God's name in vain. Yeah. Like me slapping like God told me like whatever, right? It's just like whatever agenda I have. That's taking God's name in vain. Like not getting mad at Stranger Things pinball because it screwed you. Like, that's not taking God's name in vain.
So you're set until you get better at pinball, Johnny.
I'm like, it was honestly like I felt that the seas parted way. like it was a divine intervention for me to hear them, because you feel bad. I mean, like being raised in a Southern Baptist community is just like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that, and it's just like, well, maybe you're halfway right on half of these things.
It is always good to consider the fact that like maybe I'm only half right.
Yes. Well, then I think, when you're only half right on half the things, you're only a quarter right.
I don't
At most.
I don't appreciate you bringing fractions.
No one said there'd be math.
So, Brian, it sounds like you know a lot about the Bible. Do you just read it a lot? Do you start at the beginning, go to the end, and then retrack? How did you learn this stuff?
Oh, good night. I don't know. So I mean, do y'all want my spiritual journey in a brief nutshell? Is that what you want here for
Yeah,
training and whatnot?
I do.
I challenge you to do it in 5 sentences.
Ooh.
I grew up in a small town First Baptist, Southern Baptist church. I felt a call to ministry my senior year of high school and went to college and got a bachelor's in religion. I continued my theological journey in seminary and got my master's degree at the former Logston Seminary in Abilene, Texas. May it rest in peace. Through that process of college and seminary,
here comes a bunch of commas.
I began the process of deconstruction as I was academically studying what had only been like regular church life and like Sunday school faith. Through my deconstruction, I came to a more robust understanding of religion and spirituality and God and how all those things interconnect. So here I sit.
That was 5 sentences, everybody. Good job. And Ryan counted on his fingers so that Johnny and I didn't have to, because we're pretty dum-dums.
You didn't want to see me count to 11. I assure you.
I think that that deconstruction image is really important. My past life also included going to seminary, and something that I loved, a professor at seminary said, seminary is you arrive at seminary and you have got a packed suitcase, and it is all of the theology, beliefs, values, behaviors. It's everything that faith-wise you grew up with, that your family of origin, your church, your congregation, synagogue taught you to believe, and taught you was true. And the process of seminary is take everything out of that suitcase and decide what you want to put back in. And I think we all have a lot of suitcases, whether it's about our faith or about how families should work. The idea that you actually have permission to take everything out and decide what you want to put in that suitcase. Was there anything like that for you when you were in seminary? You mentioned the deconstruction.
Yes, yes. And so, actually, in a similar metaphor, so we're going to be overly metaphor today.
Yes.
Our seminary talked about how like the process that they gave us was like it was like a buffet, and so you go in and they were like, here's the gamut of the options of the Christian tradition. Like we're going to show you kind of historically where everything falls, and it's up to you to pick and choose what's going to work for you on your platter. And so that's what I did. I actually began the process in college. It happened because I had this delightfully aggressive Old Testament professor who walked into our class. I was a freshman, right? So I'm an 18-year-old kid. I walk into this Old Testament class and he like gives us a syllabus, goes through it, and he goes, your homework is to go through and read the two Genesis accounts and tell us all the differences and like why there's two different creation accounts. And that was it. Like, and that began the journey of processing and realizing the tension and all the beauty and the uniqueness of what all these ancient texts were and what sort of literature they were and what their purposes were. And they weren't just this thing that you're told to believe because you're supposed to believe it, but it is this living cacophony of voices all dancing together to tell a story.
Yeah. I think I would just agree on the account of aggressive Old Testament professor. I'm thinking back to the Old Testament professors I've had, and every single one of them was eccentrically aggressive. So I'm glad that's a common theme. Johnny, what about you? How did you get from Southern Baptist upbringing to where you go to church? And do you go to church?
I do.
What are you doing?
I go to your church when I go.
Oh, that's right. You switched.
I switched.
See, it's been so long since I've been in person and I haven't been tuning in on YouTube.
Yeah. So no, I went to the church that Ryan is at now. And I started going there, I don't even know how many years ago now. And my pastor is John Carroll, and he was awesome. He looked like, for those of you that watch wrestling, he looks like Finn Balor. For those of you that watch DC television shows, he looks like the Flash on the WB, Grant Gustin. And great looking guy. He was my neighbor. And when I first moved into the house I lived in, he came over, drank some moonshine with me. And I was just like, wow, you're pretty cool. And you look like Finn Balor in the Flash. And he was like, hey, come to church. I was like, I'm good. And I went through a period in which I was trying to make myself the best self that I could. I started running 3 to 10 miles a day, which I still do. I started seeing a psychologist, and I actually went to a Christian-based psychologist. I kind of wanted to kill two birds with one stone. It's just like, hey, I get a little for column A, a little for column B. So, and it doesn't matter if you go to a faith-based psychologist or a non-faith-based. They don't answer anything. They just give you questions. So if you're looking for answers anywhere, you will not find them. I promise you. If there's a psychologist involved,
They want to keep their license.
Right. And so I decided to add, I was eating right and stopped drinking, all these things, and so the final element, I was like, let me try church. I grew up in Danville, Virginia, and I went to North Main Baptist. I remember, every Sunday you get you get a disciple keychain and stuff. They did the gimmicks, to make you go. And so I went, and what I took out of going to church, and it still holds true today. I can't tell you the Bible passage that's read. I probably can't tell you most of the points being illustrated in the sermon. However, I use it to put me in a headspace and to serve as a reminder weekly to just do something good that week. Yeah. And if 1 hour of my week of my life is all it takes for me to do that personally, that works for me. And so, as I said, I went to Ryan's church. My pastor, John Carroll, left, and and he was like, hey, I'm leaving. And I was actually one of the first people he told. And he was like, I don't know who they're going to have to replace me. I don't think everyone was super happy that, that they rolled the dice, being an old church with an old congregation. They rolled the dice on a younger pastor, and then worst case scenario, he leaves. So he was like, he goes, I don't know how this is going to shake out. He goes, there is potential that they will go the opposite direction because they got burned. So I was like, well, I'm not coming if the guy or girl, I don't care what sex. I need young, I need cool, I need someone that I can identify with. And so John recommended your pastor who had just come over.
That's right. Hi,
Not-
Drew.
Hi, Drew.
Hey, Drew.
And so I met with Drew. I went. I checked out a sermon, and then Drew and I went and had coffee, coffee, and coffee talk, and it was great. I got there. I'm just like, this is a good fit, and so I was going every week, until COVID, and then watching online, and I'm starting back going in person, just kind of my life is a little bit in shambles work wise. So let me get that and then let me get everything lined back up. And but in the interim, a year later, Ryan is hired as the new pastor. I was just like, this dude seems cool, and you are. And the precipice for us being here today is I do a Survivor podcast, and I do everything possible not to talk Survivor on this podcast. If you need Survivor talk, I got 100 other podcasts a month. Go find them. But on the new season of Survivor, there's a woman. Her name is Shan, and she grew up in Toronto. She was born in Toronto, grew up in DC, joined a street gang, and is now a pastor. And so we were doing the cast assessment, and they're like, Johnny Fairplay, how do you think Shan's going to do? And I was like, well, being a pastor, she's probably used to, lying, cheating, and stealing. She should do great. And, and the room went silent, like, how could you say? And I'm just like, I'm kidding. I was like, but let me say this. I'm like, pastors can be cool. I go, we both have children the same age, Ryan and and we do the youth soccer. And I go to see my daughter Madeline play soccer. She's 4, and I wear a soccer dad T-shirt that happens to say "lie, kick, and steal" at the bottom. Available at johnnyfairplay.com. And I look over, and there's the cool pastor with his son on the other team wearing a Ballad Brewing T-shirt, which is the local brewery here. And I'm like, pastors can be cool. This dude is at a 4-year-old soccer game wearing a local brewery shirt. That's cool. Like that. This guy plays Survivor. I'm not thinking, oh, well, he's going to sit everyone down to do Bible verses before every challenge, and then it's going to be and going to explain to everyone how, hey, we technically can't vote anyone out because it's wrong. I don't feel like that's the case.
No, it's not. I mean, I don't have any cool stories like I survived gang life like she did. I mean, yeah.
And you and I had this. I broached the idea of you being on the podcast, and I saw you had just finished up doing Oktoberfest Beer Olympics.
This is true.
Did you win?
No.
No. Well,
no.
Okay,
You just have to keep training.
Yeah.
Rigorously.
Yes. So, but no, John Carroll would go have a beer. As I said, had moonshine with me the first night I met him. Drew, our pastor. You'll see him at Ballad. More than once a week.
That is actually, I'm having coffee with Drew on Wednesday, and he saw me at Ballad, and then called the next day to set up a meeting. I hope I'm not in trouble for not attending. But like, oh yeah, we ran into each other at Ballad, and so now we're gonna catch up in person. So he's a good pastor.
Yeah, but I feel like if you're not a part of the community, it's hard for you to tell the community what they should and shouldn't do. And I don't think your exact position is to tell people what they should and shouldn't do, but I feel like you give us some guidelines as a voice of God.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first hurdles I had to I guess one of the best ego hits I got really early was realizing I can't change people at all. Even if I thought that was my job, then I'm the worst at my job ever, because in ministry, while you have a platform and a voice and you have kind of a duty to your people, I can't change you, and I don't need to waste my time trying. And so rather, I think a really great ministry philosophy or just a life philosophy in general is, I hate to kind of jump to this already, but kind of like Irenaeus is an early Christian leader, and he used to say that the glory of God is humanity fully alive. And so I think that part of ministry is helping people to become fully alive, fully themselves, fully their authentic self, not the self that I have created in order to survive in this world, that we, like that armor that we put on to kind of like that we've developed from our from our family systems, from our early church systems, but learning who I truly am and what my passions truly are, and then aligning that to the good purposes of this world. And that's, I think, what pastoring ought to be, is giving people tools and equipping them and encouraging them to be that person. And that's when they're going to change the world. That's when the divine is most satisfied, is when we're living into who we were meant to be.
So you've taken the wind out of the sails for my question, because what got Johnny into First Baptist was his neighbor being cool with him and not really pushing church, but just being a cool person. And, is it hard to balance whenever you're talking to someone who doesn't go to your church, you're representing your church. And so like sales mentality, the more people I can get into my church, the more stable it'll be. We'll have more money coming in. But once people clock that that's your intention, it's not going to work as well. But it sounds like you're just into being authentic and being yourself. And so I guess you're not walking around with a sales mentality about your church.
No, I mean, I think First Baptist rocks, and people should come and check us out. Like, I don't think there's any sense in hiding that. But no, we grew up with sales. We can smell a sales pitch and a salesman from a mile away. And if you're like me, you just avoid them. So why would I go and want to be that guy that I hate?
Right.
It just doesn't work, and it's gross too. Like it's not just it doesn't work.
It feels
bad. Because if it works, you still shouldn't do it anyway. Yeah, because it's sleazy. It's inauthentic. It's not encountering people where they are and journeying with them in life. Spiritual friendship is a much better direction to be as people who are people of faith walking in this world, rather than spiritual salesmen. So
you have done movement work, which the first time you talked about it, I thought you meant like physical therapy, but I think you mean more like
Did you really think physical therapy?
Yes, he said. Look, Ryan said that he trained to be a movement chaplain, and so I thought it was a chaplain that embodies chaplaincy, and that it involves like sitting on some exercise balls and like a combination of yoga and chaplaincy. I thought that's what movement chaplaincy meant. The more you talked, though, you talked about being a chaplain for nonprofit workers and people who are community organizers. So I'm thinking now that when you say movement chaplain, you mean more like community organizing. Now tell me if it's a third thing and I'm still wrong.
That's pretty close.
Okay.
So yeah, not.
Kendall's the smart one too. That's the problem I have at this point.
Yoga is good and beautiful and helpful, but that's not what I'm trained in at all. Obviously, no, it's not what I'm good at. Rather, it's coming alongside people and giving them support and giving them tools and practices so that they can do sustainable good work. Like in certain careers, you have higher burnout rates than others. And in nonprofit life and in activist life and in organizing life, like burnout rates are systemically higher than in other careers. And so what I got training is how do I, as an individual, and then hopefully create a network of support beyond just myself, to provide support in this area for folks so that they can keep doing their work and not quit and go into another field, because that's what we don't need. We don't need people coming in trailblazing for 2 or 3 years, 5 years, and then leaving that field completely. Like, we need them to do methodical, intentional work to make real progress in our world. And I want to come alongside them so that they can do that.
It's a huge need. As someone who's experienced nonprofit burnout in the last year, I have to tell you, geez, huge need. I think about this with, are you making relationships to recruit to your church or to just be yourself out in the world? I with movement work, nonprofits, sorry, I'm not leading with the punchline here. I always think about metrics, and in my nonprofit job, which involved a lot of community building, relationship building, and then in previous ministry jobs, the nuts and bolts of the work itself I really liked, but you have to have metrics at some level. The number of people in your church matters, and your church is noticing how many seats are filled or empty. And church is, in some ways, a business. The utilities company does not turn your lights on for free just because you're a faith institution. And the same with nonprofits. And so that was, I don't know that having a nonprofit chaplain would have helped with this or not, but looking back, I realized that was my constant frustration point with community work, relationship work for a job, is that no matter how good you felt about, no matter how good I felt about the work I was doing, I knew in the back of my mind that numbers and metrics mattered. And when that was in ministry jobs where it's people's faith and their souls, like having to put a number on how many having to talk about it in a sales way, like as if the people that you are talking to are leads, that felt terrible. But it was also, one of my jobs was a church outreach job, and how could I not be aware that if none of these people ever come to this church, how long are they going to be interested in funding this position? So I don't know, maybe it would have made a difference to have had like a nonprofit community worker chaplain to talk to about these things. But instead I'm talking about it with you now on a
Well,
podcast.
hindsight is 2020. It is what it is. And that's, and part of it too is, I think a lot of people get scared too, because when they hear chaplain, it's naturally a religious term.
That's true.
And naturally, the pastor of First Baptist being a chaplain, you're automatically making those connections. But that's not really the point. The point is me to be able to provide emotional and spiritual support for people across the spectrum. And so that's what's really great too, is no matter where someone is on their path or their belief system, it's giving them tangible tools so that they can do healing work, that they can do rest well, or they can do practices for holistic living and becoming better versions of themselves, or at least more sustainable versions.
And you're involved with our local LGBTQ group. So would you say that, are you doing that as a participant, or is that part of your hope too, to be a positive resourcing presence to our local LGBTQ community?
Yeah, I think it probably at a couple of levels. One, I want to be a support to our LGBTQ community because it's important that they get support, especially outside the walls of institutional Christianity, because Christianity has done so much damage historically and has a long way to go to heal that and to make amends. I would say make restitution for those sorts of things. And then two, as a participant, I have so many friends and family that are part of the LGBTQ community that I want to be an ally. I want to be in support. I want to be at things. So that's why, like, you can find pictures of me at one of the drag shows that was outside, recently at the other brewery in town, and doing other things because I care and I want to be a support. And I think it matters. And so, as a matter of fact, we just finished up our first. It was a Zoom, which everyone is zoomed out, but it is what it is. We had a Zoom church hurt session where, like, I was able to talk to people and just tell them, like, no, you're not crazy. Like, churches can hurt you, and like, you're carrying baggage, and let's name this, and here's some practices to go away from that. And we're trying to make that a regular thing, so that folks are developing support with kaleidoscopes to heal from church hurt, church trauma, because that's very real. Church can be just as awful as anywhere else sometimes. So.
That's awesome. I'm really glad you can be a presence there. Did you have any worry about political fallout for that at your church?
No, just because I'm at a point in my life where I don't care anymore.
Yes, the fucking point. We love it.
Well, so the search committee and I were very clear with each other, and I'm not getting them in trouble by talking as candidly as I am right now, like where we stood on things, and they knew who I was, and they knew where I fell on certain issues, and so they knew what they were hiring. And like, I'm not going to hide that Now, everyone in the church, like the church is a spectrum. And to say that everyone at the church is where I am is a lie. But we are a church that cares deeply for folks. We try to be a welcoming place. We're still in conversational journey about where we want to head and in directions and issues. But I mean, like, it is no secret that First Baptist has LGBTQ folks leading in the church, serving in the church, and being fully participating.
But does your church know that? Because my grandma's church became a very queer, welcoming church all around her. And up until the last year of her life, her thing was, well, they're just roommates. Gran, they've adopted children together. Rent's not that expensive. They're life partners. By the end of her life, she was like, yes, they are gay and okay with me. But it is amazing.
Yeah.
She did have decades of multiple cohabitating life partner gay couples in her church, and she was like, well, they're just roommates.
Well, you know, there probably is some of that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, but I think that, yeah, when people have kids together, it's really hard to
Man, they are really close roommates.
Wow.
It's so weird. Do they sign a lease for the kids?
They can only afford one bed.
Goodness, yeah. So, but that's the journey, I think, for a lot of churches. I mean, maybe not some, like if you're Southern Baptist, you're never going to have those conversations. But for churches that aren't in those particular, like, evangelical Christian subcultures, like, this is the tension that we're in. Some churches have already, like, they've already created the brave space. They've already had those hard conversations, and they've made decisions either to be fully affirming or not affirming. And a lot of churches are stuck in this kind of like awkward dance where, like, how do we talk about this in a way that we don't kill each other and don't hurt people in the process,
Right.
And so, and that's part of, I mean, that's part of my job, is to help churches that I pastor have those conversations and say, you're gonna have to make a decision at some point. Like, it's 2021, and so how do you walk in faith together and have a good conversation about, are we going to be welcoming and affirming, or are we not going to be welcoming and affirming?
And not making the decision is a decision, because for people like me, I want to go to a church that is intentional about being welcoming. But now that I'm saying that, I don't know if our church, Donnie, has come out and said an emphatic statement. So never mind. I'm full of shit. I don't practice what I preach.
It's okay. Most of us don't. But no, you'll have it. As a matter of fact, there's only one church.
And First Baptist takes the lead.
Well, like, we haven't either.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. Like,
Right.
It's hard. And people, like, the Grace in Maine is the only church in this town.
Okay.
That's not because its denomination said so, is made that decision. And they're an intentional community, and that's not everybody's jam. They're fantastic, and I love working with them. They're wonderful partners, and I think they do some good work. The Hearns are some of the best people you could ever meet, in my opinion.
And for those of you that don't know, Danville, Virginia has more churches per capita than anywhere in the U.S.
Yeah. If not the most, one of the most. For sure.
That is.
We're a churchy place. Yeah.
Very so to have that many and have one out of how many?
Yeah. Like, I know, like, officially, like, there are denominations that are, right? So the Episcopal Church is welcoming and affirming as a denomination. But that also varies church to church, because some churches can say, well, yeah, that's the thing, but we're
going to let you know.
and so that's part of it, you know, and the same thing with the Presbyterian Church, same thing with, anyway.
Right.
So churches need to have these conversations, and we need to do it well. And, like, I have been here. What is today? Tomorrow will be a year.
Oh my gosh!
Tomorrow I will have been in town a year.
Wow.
Holy
happy
holy
anniversary.
Shit! It's very holy.
So, like, I don't have any credibility in my congregation to have that conversation yet. We're still learning each other, and I did it in the middle of a pandemic. So, like, all the relational credit that I would need to have as a minister to walk people intentionally through that conversation, I have not built. And it's going to take time. and then we'll figure out what the church wants to do.
And Johnny mentioned our town. Danville was the last capital of the Confederacy. Like many towns in the South, our racial history is deeply racist and deeply segregated. And I think your church actually, there was a spin-off church from First Baptist that was the Black congregation, and First Baptist was the white congregation. I can't remember enough details to make that make sense at the moment, but there's enough racial work, like there's enough economic justice work to be done in Danville. You're so right that you need to build the relational capital to do something like have a conversation about being a gay welcoming church. And it is still so frustrating because there's enough other work that needs to be done on racial healing, on economic healing in our community. Not even economic healing, just like helping some people. There's a lot of poverty in our town.
Absolutely.
But I say that as someone who feels very confident in God's cool with people being gay. So like, why are we still talking about this? And you're right, as the head of your church, pastor of your church, that where people are and what it would take to move forward.
Yeah.
I have strong feelings about this topic.
And you should.
All right. So every podcast, we invite our guests to name a charity that they feel strongly about, or not so strongly about. I don't know why you would name one that you don't feel strongly about. I feel that most people have leaned in on the ones that they feel strongly about. Do you think thus far that's been the trend?
Yeah, they usually have strong big feelings.
Okay.
Positive ones.
Okay. Do you have such feelings?
I do. So I've had the pleasure. I'm actually on the board, so of our local homelessness shelter is called House of Hope, and it is the only one in this area, not just in the town proper, but in this South Side Virginia region. House of Hope is the only traditional shelter that there is that's not tied to domestic abuse. Right? We have some domestic abuse shelters, but that's different. So for whatever reason, this area has one small shelter for homelessness, for getting people in transition, which is staggering to me. Well, yeah. And so the good news is that we're in the process of acquiring some grants to greatly expand capacity, which is great.
Nice.
But this shelter is also in the midst of recognizing that in order to then staff a highly upgraded shelter, we're going to need to hire more staff. We're going to have to increase payroll, and we'll see a homelessness increase. And I'm not getting on a high horse here, but inevitably, whenever you bring in a casino in a few years, which we're going to be Dan Vegas now, and we're going to have a casino, naturally, with all the travel that comes back and forth from that creates opportunities for homelessness numbers to increase. And so how do we prepare for that well as a city to be able to tend to those people and help them get back on their feet? I mean, I don't know the stats fully, but the numbers are high that most Americans would be on the streets if they missed like 1 to 2 paychecks. Right. I think it's over 50% of us would be out on the street if like our income was not there for like for a very brief amount of time. And so homelessness is close to all of us, even if we aren't cognizant of that fact. And so how do we make space to not judge people who have fallen into homelessness, but to give them a chance to recover and move forward?
Yeah. So House of Hope.
Yeah, House of Hope. Or if you don't feel comfortable giving to this one, give to your local homeless shelter. Like they need money and resources. And so if you're feeling weird giving to that one, like look into your own community and give to yours too. Like it's needed everywhere.
And we'll provide the link in the show notes. You'll see the link to make a donation.
And the cool thing, Ryan mentioned that they were applying for grants. Anytime an organization, a nonprofit, is applying for grants, not just the number of donations they've gotten, but the number of donors they have really matters. And so if you give $5 to House of Hope, that is still incredibly helpful to them because that's one more person on their roster saying, I believe in this mission. And grant funders absolutely look at those numbers. Again, it comes back to fucking metrics. So give to House of Hope or another homeless shelter.
Yeah. And secondly, we always ask our guests for a call to action.
Yes. So I've already quoted Irenaeus, and I'm going to go back to that. So I want you to be fully alive, be fully human, be your authentic self. Because when you do that, you are creating more good in the world. And you are, in my opinion, as a minister, and some of you don't care about this part, but like you are being who the divine made you to be. Like, so you are making the divine happy when you are living your best life. So pursue what makes you passionate. Pursue the things that make you a more healthy person. Do things like y'all have already had such a great cast on here. I'm so humbled to be like following some of the other hosts. Like go to therapy. Like I'm in therapy. Go get therapy. Like go and recognize the need for like how to like connect to like practices, whether it's yoga or like meditation or contemplation, to ground yourself so that you can be the best version of yourself.
Don't be a realtor and be a full-time podcaster.
Well, only if that balance brought you pure joy, man.
Oh,
Like,
you have no idea.
well,
I have been saying hallelujah for 4 days straight. I don't use the word hallelujah.
go. It's even appropriate. It's after Easter.
That's sweet. I'm glad I got my timing down. Did I mention I'm not good at walking away from the sermon with the
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was wonderful, and I hope anyone listening who's got a past of trauma with the church, that it was nice to hear from maybe a different perspective than they were expecting. So thank you for doing what you do and how you do it.
Well, thank y'all. It's been my pleasure. So thanks for having me on.
And listeners, if you just want to hear more talk about like behind the curtain at churches, or like the dick jokes and puns that are in the Bible because they're there, let us know in the comments or tag me on Instagram, because I love talking about the background stuff of churches and just theology, but obviously that doesn't fit within this podcast. So if anyone's interested in just more gabbing about that, I would love to know. And Johnny, I'm just going to have to make like a theology NSFW spinoff. Just
I'm ready. I'll let the graphics guy know.
Okay, great.
So with that, we will see you guys in 2 weeks, as we always do. And don't forget, hit up Kendall's website.
Tryonething.co.
Go to church. Ryan has one, First Baptist Church in Danville, Virginia. And check out me talk all the reality that you will ever want to hear at realitynsfw.com. So until 2 weeks from now, bye.